welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Pioneer Improvement Plan and what the city has recently done towards moving forward with that plan. I'll be giving you all the details in just a moment, right after a brief message from our sponsor.
And you don't even know you are the stranger in the corner on the second floor. You're the girl next door, the girl next door. The stranger in the corner on the second floor. You're the girl next door. I know you're miles away from me, but still I dream of you and say your name in my sleep. Tell me, isn't that crazy? Just wanna call you up and tell you how I feel. I see you wherever I go, and you don't even know. You are the stranger in the corner on the second floor. You're the girl next door, the girl next door. The stranger in the corner on the second floor. You're the girl next door. You're the girl next door, yeah. Girl next door, yeah. You're the girl next.
And we're back. Thanks for watching. So, the Pioneer Improvement Plan, or Pioneer Widening Project, or Pioneer Trail Project, it's known by many different names, but essentially what it is this: it's taking the existing Pioneer Road now and talking about ways that it could be expanded into something more like a maybe a 4-lane road or something else. Now, what you're looking at here is a screenshot from the PowerPoint presentation that the city engineer gave. And essentially, what this is the blue indicates where this project would take place, what the anticipated Pioneer Road would look like when it's finished. And as you can tell, most of it is existing road, but the plan is more or less to widen it out, etc. So one of the reasons why people like to think of this as a bypass, so to speak, is if you look at the plan as a whole, right, and you see it in many respects is you can theoretically come into the city, right, at the beginning of the city, really, either way, whether you're coming east or west, and then essentially hop onto this road and basically bypass the city. So that's why a lot of people like to think of this as a bypass. The reality is that this is not a true bypass, like what people are talking about when they really say a bypass. A bypass would be more like what they have in Turlock, a large, basically highway infrastructure. Essentially, really takes you around the city, and it's kind of a highway bypass. This was something that was proposed and recommended for the city years ago, but Los Banos at that point turned it down, and as a result, it didn't come to fruition. Many people refer to this as essentially a pseudo bypass, or basically a plan B, to try to rectify that issue. But it's very contentious, and not everybody is really on board with this plan. Some people love it and some people hate it, and it's very contentious and political, to say the least. A lot of people have very strong feelings about it, one way or the other. So looking at this map here, and I could be mistaken, but it looks like it's coming in on Ward over to Pioneer, takes Pioneer down. I believe this is Vialta Road, I think, and then it goes to 152, right? So basically, it would take you out to the college. That looks like that's the college there. So essentially, this takes you more or less around the city. It acts as a what we would think of as basically a bypass, right? Some of the things that I need to make clear to you as the public is to understand, because there's a lot of misconceptions around this project, is that this project is far from complete. And in fact, it's even far from really even being improved. There are many opportunities for it to be killed by the legislature. By that, I mean city council. And really, we're in the very early beginning stages where we're essentially looking for funding and the city is looking for data in order to conduct more analysis. And part of that is actually to see, is the project even worth it? Now, the current acting public works director, which you'll see here in a moment, answering questions from the city council members about this project, he essentially argued the point that he needs more data, that there needs to be the traffic survey, there needs to be a study on impact, environmental impact, etc. And so that way he can take that data and really conclude, is this project in fact worth it? Is this project really going to benefit a lot of people? Will this indeed make it faster, slower, etc.? He has his opinions, of course, but he wants to remain objective and look at the data and see what the data tells him. And that was something he made very clear. And as a man of science myself, I personally can respect that, wanting to see the data. This is why he asked for an amendment to the project plan from last time, which basically moves phase two, which phase two is broken into three phases: 2A, 2B, and 2C. And essentially, what this does is it makes the traffic study a priority. So that way, there's more data to know if it's really worth it to proceed or not, what would the impact be, etc. This is also where they would start to formulate, and I'm referring to the entire phase two part. This is also where they would start to create the documents, the legal documents, and basically come up with the plan. On top of that, the other things that they would do is they would figure out the priority list. In other words, they'd figure out which segments of the road that they're going to start on first and when, and to give timelines. They need the data in order to really make those kind of decisions. And so that's why really step one is getting data. The part that was already done was essentially just a vote to proceed. Now we're at the next part where essentially we're starting to pay for studies, surveys, consultants, etc., in order to tell us how the road should look, how it should be designed, if it's worth it or not, etc., and to present alternative projects. Now, this is another screenshot from the slideshow, and it's an explanation of the phases and where we are now. So, where we are now is essentially at phase one. And what this voting decision was to do was to move into two. And phase two has been moved into three phases. And those phases were described by the engineer, and I took notes, and they are essentially as follows. 2A is referring to engineer services in general, and it would include the traffic survey, the traffic count. 2B is focusing on environmental services and compliance. This is so that a way environmental impacts can be mitigated or avoided if possible. And so that a way, because this is going to be receiving funding likely from various sources, some may be state or federal. If the city takes those routes and takes those funding sources, they come with some strings attached, essentially. Then they have to comply with federal and state environmental regulations. And so, in order to do that, they need to do an environmental impact study. Then we look at 3C. 3C was explained as being about surveying and right of way services. And this is where they would create the technical documents and finalize the documents. So, in other words, create much of the blueprint and get down to some of the nitty gritty that would tell us more about what specifically we're going to more see after the data's come out. Detailed design phase three wasn't really discussed at the meeting, but part of what 2A, B, and C really is starting on phase three, not just in terms of collecting the data, but by creating some of the technical documents and early draft blueprint, etc. That's preparation for phase three. And phase three seems to largely be where we get to the fine tuning and details and come to a complete agreement on what it's going to look like, what it's going to be, etc., etc. Once you are at that phase, that's pretty much the final phase in terms of being able to kill it or not, so to speak. And then last, obviously, would be construction. Based on what the city engineer was saying, it seems like it would actually take a few years to really get through these first three phases. And essentially, what we're at is we just began phase two, more specifically, phase 2A. And so this is far from a done deal. So if you have reservations, etc., want to say something about this, there's still plenty of opportunities to bring up your concerns, etc. Now, the intent presented behind this entire project is essentially to alleviate traffic from Pacheco Boulevard. Some people refer to this project kind of as a bypass in a sense, because the idea is that some of the traffic could be diverted from Pacheco Boulevard onto Pioneer Trail. Some of the city council members in the meeting brought up some of their concerns with it, arguing points such as that the Pioneer Trail is already used by many residents and is fast and okay as it is, and to add a bunch of traffic lights, etc., would actually slow it down. Now, the consultant that our city seems to have hired is Mark Thomas. And part of the agreement is that they're going to help us find funding from McCag, Caltrans. So they're going to help us with some of the funding and the grant. It also seems that they're going to help us with hiring and looking for other surveyors who do services outside of what they do. They're going to be helping with general engineering. And really, what's being voted on now, or what was just voted on, is actually just a decision to move forward to collect data. There are many, many opportunities to basically kill this project, if you will. And so it has a long ways to go. So, a couple things that you want to keep in mind with this are that one, it's going to be when and if it's ever started, it's going to be quite some time from now. And two, it may never even come to fruition. It could very well be voted down. So, this traffic study, this traffic analysis is really what's being talked about here. It's being moved and pushed forward so that a way the engineer will have more data. And the schedule that he told the city council, which some of this is a schedule and then some of this is anticipated or estimated. So, the first thing would be to collect the traffic count and to collect the raw data. And they believe that this will be finished and approved by mid fall of this year, so mid fall 2021. They weren't any more specific than that. Then there comes the analysis and interpretation of the data. It's on the schedule to be submitted to Caltrans by spring of 2022. So, to give you basically a ballpark idea, this portion of the phase, which is essentially gathering data and then doing analysis and kind of doing cost benefit and et cetera, is going to start in the near future, right? So you might start to see people out there with survey equipment, et cetera, along Pioneer here in the near future. And then the data is going to be interpreted, suggestions will be made, plans drawn up, things will be submitted to the various organizations that they'll be seeking funding from. And then there will be more meetings after that. And at which point, council members, et cetera, can look at said data and make a decision whether they want to continue or proceed with this project, or if they feel as though the data doesn't support the necessity, or if the data doesn't support the expenditure. So this wasn't really a vote to continue with Pioneer plan entirely. What this really was a vote to collect the data, to look at it really, and to try to make an informed decision from that point. So this is another slide that I took from the presentation. Essentially what this is a chronological list of the various actions that the city government has taken on and towards this specific project. So, what you can basically see from this is that it essentially really started back in 2017 under Mayor Mike Vialta, and then it continued 2019. There was 3 times where action was taken to proceed forward. But really, the largest step was really taken on January 6, 2021, shortly after Tom Free had become mayor, which is where they accepted the resolution 6304 and 6305, which essentially accepted the complete streets plan, which is the overall plan that encompasses the Pacheco and the Pioneer Improvement Plan. However, at that point, it still wasn't a done deal. All it really did was essentially allow us to take the initial plans and then kind of proceed from there into more detailed planning and surveys, etc. A lot of people aren't aware that government moves at an extremely slow pace, and it's not really at the fault of the individual leaders doing it. It's more really to do with just the fact that there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and there's a lot of studies and things that are required, and transparency requirements, etc., etc. These all slow things down and take a while, and especially if you're getting funding from outside sources such as state and federal, the CAG, etc., etc., it adds a lot of different types of things that you have to do in order to receive the funding, and it really slows down the process. So this has been something that's been in the works for quite some time, but to most of you, that's really not anything new to hear. You probably were aware. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a clip to the city council meeting. So basically, you're going to get to see what the city council members said, what comments they made about this particular plan, the questions that they asked the city engineer, and the responses that he gave. And then you're ultimately going to see how they voted. So let's watch.
With that, we are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go to council for questions. Mr. Jones, any questions of staff?
No questions. I mean, I do have my concerns with this total project, especially when it comes to build out. If I can give my thoughts and concerns, it would be when this project was presented, it was to alleviate traffic off Pacheco, so Pacheco flows a little better. And I feel like it's kind of shifting to more of kind of creating another route around town for more local traffic than bypass traffic. Again, this is almost 2 miles out of someone's way if they're passing through town, is what Pioneer Road would be. It doesn't sweep on through. There's no real long curves to it. There's right angles. You got signal lights, and the signal lights are going to slow down traffic, and they're going to slow down existing traffic that don't have an issue or that are not impacted right now on Pioneer. So these are my main concerns. What are we going to do to the existing flow of traffic that uses it every day? I'm a frequent user of that road, and I don't see a problem as it's laid out. So I see this as just a planning document that will kind of confirm what we're thinking. I'm a big fan of data and numbers. And so I'm interested to see what we come up with. So I do appreciate staff for answering a lot of questions that I had earlier this week on this item here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions or comment, Mr. Lambert?
Just a comment or maybe a question. So the traffic study, so from hearing from the past, we have not actually found out what our traffic would be through there by the count of vehicles or so this is going to be moving forward with this next phase to get that actual count, correct?
That is correct. And if to the extent that there's some data may be available, we are going to update those, use them. But this is basically a fresh start to develop existing counts and based on the engineering process, forecast these into the future. The road that, any road that is built has to meet not only today's demands, but also generally we go 20, 25 years into the future. So those projections have to account for that. Otherwise, your road very quickly becomes obsolete. There's no need for it if it only meets today's demands and not tomorrow's or down the road a couple of decades needs. So yes, we will take existing traffic information and we will also project those into the future.
So I actually I took it upon myself. I actually drove this road a couple of times this last week during days off. And I actually made it pretty quick myself, just coming through between, Walmart and Target off that road down to Pioneer, cutting across from Pioneer over to Mercy Springs. Minimal stop and minimal traffic. And I tried to do it at, I thought would be one of the busy part of time of the days. I think the only place I ran into an issue was at Mercy Springs and Pioneer, just because there's no stoplight there, just a stop sign. But it would be interesting to see the study.
Quite frankly, as an engineer, I'm excited. I want to see the data.
Right.
My gut says one thing, but my engineering side says, where's your data?
Correct.
So that's really, as an engineer, I'm excited. I want to have this data.
Another thing I was thinking about also is my business side, pulling traffic away from 152 there through town. We'll be taken away from businesses, not driving by saying, oh, hey, let's stop off, let's get something to eat right here. Those are some things that I thought about also. But the future is the future.
Yes, and I'm not an expert in NEPA, but generally impact on businesses sometimes are included and required to be included. So there is some level of analysis when federal funds are involved in a project. But I'm not clear at this point exactly to what extent that is looked at.
Naturally, we won't know. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lewis, any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions, just a couple of comments. And I think at the beginning of this project, one of the things that I had concern, like Councilmember Lambert, is pulling away traffic from our commercial on Pacheco Boulevard. It was probably a hope of mine that this could be more of like a commercial bypass to get those big trucks around the town so they're not slowing traffic down on Pacheco. And like him, Pacheco Pioneer runs pretty smoothly right now. So it'll be interesting to see what the data is going to be outside of probably towards the end of the week, where in the past when we had full workforces out there, Pacheco was pretty jam-packed from Walmart all the way through the end of town up to Mercy Springs, and it was hard to get through town. It was just stop traffic. And I began to see people, and it would probably be mostly locals within town, using either Ortegalita or Center Avenue going south to access Pioneer Avenue out to Mercy Springs. And then you would see a lineup at the stop sign on Pacheco and Mercy Springs. So again, with that, I would like to see the data and what the projections are going forward on this, because right now it doesn't show that the necessity of that. But as things are done, if you build it, they will come. So that's how it goes. All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Llamas, any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir, I had a question about the traffic study. Now, is the traffic study just going to encompass the current and forecasted traffic on this project, or is it going to include the overall impact to the city as a whole? Are we going to have some of that in this study?
No. Once the study that you have in mind, that's basically a citywide, and that will be done after the general plan is updated. So that is a totally different level. And I see Ed came on. Ed has more detail on this, and he can answer this better.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. The traffic study for the Pioneer Road widening project. Mainly, it not only looks at the segment that we're studying for Pioneer Road, but adjacent intersections, just to see how it affects those adjacent intersections along Pacheco Boulevard, as well as the resulting intersections and the type of control that would be needed along Pioneer Road so that it operates smoothly. And also, I think I just wanted to also add to some of the comments that that were expressed earlier this evening about the Pioneer Road being a potential bypass for regional traffic and how it may affect business on Pacheco Boulevard. The direction that we received early on in the process a year ago was that the intent of Pioneer Road was not to make it a bypass for regional traffic going through the city that may affect businesses on Pacheco Boulevard, but to serve the local residents of the city, to make sure that they can still get around the city without having to only rely on Pacheco Boulevard. And I think I may have heard a comment like that from Mr. Jones about squared up intersections to make sure that it's designed to accommodate the locals, for folks that know that it exists, not necessarily someone that's coming through the city that's not aware of it. I think that was the former city engineer made it clear to us that we don't want big signs along 152 and Pacheco Boulevard letting all traffic coming through that go through this other section of roadway, because it would, I think that defeats the purpose of implementing this project so that it can serve the locals.
Okay. Yeah, just to follow up on my question was, if we're going to forecast the amount of traffic we're going to use here, and then how it's going to affect other intersections, other roadways, I think that would include that broader study. But again, the comment is that the road is working fine now. It does need maybe repaving. There are some potentially traffic issues with blind spots coming off south onto Pioneer. Again, I don't see great need right now. I understand future planning, but I also understand that much of that can be developed by developers as we incorporate or as they develop. So be interesting to see the studies, and I think that there's going to be a lot more questions as we move along. Thank you very much.
Mr. Llamas, as far as this traffic study for the entire city, that is, I just wanted to go back to that. That is something that will be done. The traffic circulation study that was done for the whole city is rather outdated. It was done several years ago. And generally, those are updated once the general plan is updated, or there's major development or something that significantly affects the traffic circulation. So this is something that we have on our calendars. So as we get closer to the approval of the new general plan, we will look for a consultant to update that so we can get a handle on the overall traffic circulation in the city. And that study will also include any future or planned developments or routes. In this case, if this project is something that is still in development, that study will include the impact of this.
Very much. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. I think at that point, we should start entertaining another route, possibly to the north. As you know, most of our population is to the north, and that would probably provide a greater service for the movement of goods, services, and personnel east to west, alleviate some of that traffic coming from 165 into town, coming from the west into town. So alleviate some of that traffic as well. But again,
Quite,
thank you.
yeah, quite frankly, as I mentioned, I moved to Los Banos just over a year ago, but I'm a homeowner now and I'm a resident. So I do want to see another route up north. So it would be good at some point to have the option for me as a local to be able to get to, yes, a second route on the north side to complement this route on the south. So as a new resident, that's something that I would love to see.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. And I'm pleased to see that we're moving forward with the with the studies, and we continue to plan. I want to make sure that as we do this, that we include that the studies, we maybe have a trigger that automatically updates to go just to make sure that environmental impact reports and other things that might be outdated by I've watched the previous projects, and sometimes the project, it takes years and then you lose ground. So we want to keep on top of it, and I'm pleased to see that moving forward, gathering information. These are and planning, and that's the most important thing, that we plan for this growth. And it's not costing the city anything. The money is all coming from the Measure V, funds, which that's their purpose, is to plan for these for transportation. And so we're doing a nice job, I think, of handling those funds, putting them to good use. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt City Council Resolution number 6334.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Council Resolution number 6334 as read by title.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Do I have a second?
Mayor, Councilmember Lambert, I'll second that.
Mr. Lambert? So I've got a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Councilmember Lambert to approve resolution number 6334 as read by title. Ms. Maloney, roll call?
Jones,
No.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Yamas,
Yes.
Faria.
Yes. Motion carried 4-1. Mr. Jones dissenting.
That city council resolution, which really was just to proceed forward with collecting data on the plan, was passed on a basis of 4-1, with one council member voting no, and that council member being Brett Jones, who expressed in the beginning his reasons for objecting or balking at the idea. And many of the sentiments and ideas and things that he brought up were also shared by other council members. One of the things to think about and to consider with this is that it's not really a done deal. There's still a lot to happen to go forward. Really, this is at a point of data collection. And so the data could come back and they could change their mind, decide something else. And there will be numerous points where they can do something about it. And once the data comes back, I believe this data would be open to the public. And so there would be a chance for us to also look at it, interpret it, and maybe give our thoughts and opinions. And I'll be looking forward to when these become published and publicly available. So there you have it, folks. There's an update on the Pioneer Trail or Pioneer Improvement Plan. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe, Los Banos Talk. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, LosBanosTalk.com. You can become a supporter of Los Banos Talk for just $4.99 a month and get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content and access to all the videos first and ad-free. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.